Is a universal feeling that transcends the language barrier. It is an aspect of life that is often part of the human experience. The visual medium offers a cross-culturally enriched perspective on trauma, with films such as La Jetée by Chris Marker, Los Olvidados by Luis Buñuel, and O Sang by Pedro Costa. The films depict several aspects of life that trauma induces, such as the struggle of survival, suffering both physically and emotionally, decaying of sanity, and overall an atmosphere of uncertainty. The films explore these effects of traumatic experiences on the human identity through a series of artistic choices such as the use of light and shadows, photographic composition, and theatrics through acting. Film was around before World War One, with silent films being introduced to broader audiences in France and the United States. But after World War II, there was a huge increase in noir films, and noir was officially introduced as a film genre during that time. According to the article Notes on Film Noir by Paul Schrader, we see that noir really is about bringing more dramatic flair to cinema, as post World War II audience wanted a more dramatic representation of reality. Overall, noir was used as a reflection to portray with a more serious tone the human condition, and was often the medium of choice to represent more dramatic experiences, often representing trauma through these films.
Ceci est l'histoire d'un homme marqué par une image d'enfance.
J'étais is this futuristic 1960s French film surrounding the aftermath of World War III, with the main protagonist inducing going through experiments which are an attempt to go to the future. These attempts result in him having memories of encounters with the unknown woman who is waiting for him at the end on La Jetée, or the bridge of the airport of Orly. Well, this film is reminiscent of World War II struggles and Cold War uncertainty, ushering in the nuclear age of World War between the United States and the Soviet Union. It offers different aspects of trauma that it analyzes, including longing, or the feeling of wanting something that you just can't have, where it's really noticeable during the scenes where the protagonist is undergoing these experiments and going into the dream slash time traveling states, where he goes and encounters the unknown woman, such as in the taxidermy zoo, or out in the um, park where they often meet and just walk around. Overall, we see him happier during this state, and the scenes are lighter, and overall, the tone is more upbeat. Whereas the tones where he goes back to the underground with the other survivors, into his own grim reality, it turns more gray scale with darker shadows and overall a more darker tone. So when at the end of the film where he wants to go and he runs over the bridge to go to the unknown woman, you can really feel his desperation because that longing is there, and it's really depictant of how a person wanting something so desperately and having it attainable at a distance would react when given that chance. At the same time, several aspects of degradation of sanity, particularly with the other survivors as well as the protagonist himself. One scene in particular is when the protagonist has the bandages and he's moving around within the still frame, and it just shifts slowly between frames with different sounds to reflect his struggle. Overall, this is a depiction of how he's worried, and the main point of trauma that Lajete introduces or talks about in throughout the film is the idea of uncertainty, especially about atomic warfare. The whole piece is centered around the idea of the survivors trying to time travel to figure out how to prevent the atomic blast from happening. Overall, we see that this is a huge concern to the audience at the time during the 1960s, where the Cold War was at full swing and people were living in fear of either the United States attacking or the Soviet Union attacking one another and ushering in a total apocalyptic warfare.
C'était celui de sa propre mort.
O Song is a Portuguese film by Pedro Costa, which is about two brothers who struggle to survive after their father leaves. They big brother takes charge of the smaller brother Nino, um, with her friend slash girlfriend Clara. Overall, we see that Nino struggles to comprehend that his father left and that he is most likely not coming back, as they keep telling him that he died when in reality he left due to problems with the Portuguese mafia. At the same time, Nino's uncle wants to take him into his own custody since he thinks that by being with him, Nino will have better opportunities and will be better fed, better clothed, and overall have a better role model than with his brother, who, despite loving him very much, does not have much to offer to him. Overall, this culminates in Nino being kidnapped by his uncle and his brother getting also kidnapped by the Portuguese mafia and eventually going down to track his brother, only to find out that he has escaped and went on his own path. Similarly, Osang also talks about the feeling of uncertainty, longing, and overall degradation of sanity as the two brothers are trying to survive in a unknown environment as their father leaves with the Portuguese mafia after their father and trying to convince the older brother to pay his father's debts. Also see that Nino is worried about losing his big brother by going to live with his uncle, whereas his uncle views that by living with him, Nino would have better opportunities and would be able to grow as a person. He would be better fed, better clothed, and overall have a better life than what his older brother could provide. Compared to La Jetée, Osang is talks about the same topics but on a more present and smaller scale. Through the scope of this one family, we see Vincent, the older brother, and Nino, the younger brother, loving each other very much, as well as Clara, Vincent's friend slash girlfriend that comes and joins him, and we see that together they're happy, even though their father is away. But due to their conditions, certain environmental factors such as the mafia or their uncle wanting to take Nino away, they're often faced with the reality of being pushed away from each other and are spending the majority of the movie trying to find each other again to return to that state of happiness where they found themselves living in harmony before. Overall, the choice of noir is very interesting in this film since it's set. It was made in 1989 with digital colorization already available during this time. But however, the choice of noir reflects the dramatic tense of the film and overall creates that more serious tone to the movie as a whole. In this case, noir, unlike La Jetée or Los Olvidados, was a conscientious choice made by the director Pedro Acosta um, to reflect the seriousness of the film's message. See also another use of light and shadows coming into play. One thing that is interesting is how in most scenes with Vincent, where he's serious and contemplating what he's going to do next, most of those scenes are darker. But for example, scenes with Clara or Nino, or where they're having fun together, those scenes are usually lighter. Overall, Clara's scenes when she shows up, they come with more light compared to Vincent's scenes, or when Vincent goes head to head with his uncle, or when he goes head to head with Mafia. Those scenes, particularly when both Vincent and his uncle are fighting, are often darker and higher speed, reflecting the overall more aggressive, angry tone, as well as the atmosphere that the movie inspires. Overall, we see Nino struggling with the idea of being away from his father, being away from his brother and Clara. Um, One scene specifically is the scene where he's at the aquarium with his uncle and his cousin, where he sees the other children walking in line, and he just stares at them with the expression of wanting to have that or longing to be one of those children who are just joyous and happy to be there. Where most children would be happy to be at the aquarium, he is not. He's thinking of his brother and possibly his father, and overall is wanting during the whole time to go back to things they were. As at the same time, we see the relationship with Clara and Vincent being stained because Vincent thinks that they would only do harm to each other, as he says, and thinks that Clara should go with somebody else instead because he thinks that he's not good enough for her.
Quanto tempo? Pensei que não tinha acontecido nada. Não me tinhas pedido nada. Tive medo.
Não aconteceu nada. Não te esqueças.
Olha para mim. Sozinha não sei se sou capaz.
Ninguém nos pode fazer mal. Ninguém é como nós.
Overall, the difference between La Jetée and this film is that this film goes more into the niches of personal experiences and also interpersonal relationships. We see how the circumstances affect both Nino and Vincent's relationship, both Nino and Vincent's relationship with their father, as well as their relationship with Clara. So we see that there are different effects to the traumatic experiences that Nino and Vincent endure on their relationships with other people. We see that Nino at the end is more bold, more sure of himself due to these traumatic experiences. He often didn't find himself. At the beginning of the movie, he was very sickly. He was introduced having a fever and being in bed with his with Vincent and his father looking over him. But by the end of the film, we see him more strong, leading the boat while the boatman is falling asleep. We also see that Vincent develops more his relationship with Clara. He involves himself as a person and confronts his fears instead of just letting them skip by. We also see that realization of their uncle as Nino runs away, and he realizes that Nino wants to be with the only family that he has left. Uh, Los Olvidados, like All Song or La Jetée, also depicts trauma at a social scale. We see the depiction of trauma in Mexico during 1950 society. We see how the poor people lived in extreme poverty. We see how kids lived, how disabled people lived, the family dynamics between the kids and their parents. Overall, we see how trauma is created and the effects that trauma has on the psychosis of these kids throughout the movie. Like Osong or La Jetée, one big aspect of trauma that this movie induces is longing. So, for example, the one of the main protagonists, Pedro, his mother is very distant, very cold with him, often hits him, neglects him, and he dreams of wanting her affection, her approval. Overall, we see that his actions reflect on his own desires. So, by him wanting to do that, he is going to turn more and more like her. So, for example, when he beats the chickens, he identifies with his mother more because he feels like that's what his mother is like um, because of the constant abuse that he is enduring from her. At the same time, we have El Haibo, who is a criminal who kills Julian, one of the other kids, after he um, rattles him out to the police. And we see how he is afraid yet commits crimes. Overall, how the trauma shaped his own personality to inflict uh, wounds on others, particularly on the man with no legs, on how they steal his cart and how they steal his belongings. We also see how he kills both Julian and Pedro at the end, and how these culminate in his own death at the end of the movie, where he sees a vision of the dog running towards him, and this could be representative of his own delirium, his own longing too, which could be what shaped him during this whole process as a whole. Overall, this movie talks about more societal factors for trauma. It also talks about more of the causes and effects of trauma. We see how trauma is able to create the monster within and liberated. We see Pedro committing some crimes. We see El Haibo committing even more grotesque crimes. And overall, we see how society treats these kids and how it disposes of them very easily. It shows a crude reality of how extreme poverty can shape trauma and can liberate trauma to create monsters and therefore create more intergenerational trauma within it. One interesting thing about this movie is the feeling that longing has on the atmosphere of uncertainty. So we see that Pedro's dreams, he's longing for his mother to come and hug him and give him the love that he wants so bad. We see in El Haibo's dream where he's dying, the dog running towards him. We also see how different kids look at each other, especially when Pedro goes to the Ferris wheel, where he is looking at the other kids and how happy they are and just wants that for himself. This is reminiscent to what Nino wants in O Song, as he just wants to be with his brother. He wants to have his old family back with Clara and overall just have a happy, normal life as any other kid would. Andre Bazin, a French film critic, would say reality is not art, but a realistic art is one that can create an integral aesthetic of reality. We see how this film creates a reality or a reflection of reality of 1950s Mexico and provides that grim, very realistic tone and setting to the piece as a whole, which reflects on the trauma itself and how it could be a danger to society if it's not properly diagnosed. We see that trauma is a significant occurrence within human experiences that deeply affects the psychology of a person, or in this case, a character. As Andre Boston's Ontology of Photographic and Film Imagery article explains, to explore the ontology of the photographic image is therefore to explore how photographs present themselves to conscientiousness and reveal their nature by careful description of what they are for us to experience. So we see that the film, as a medium to convey these messages, is very effective in how they reveal the nature of trauma and how they go around to describe it and how it impacts society as a whole.